Good evening and welcome to Tech Insights with Brian Cochran, where we are on the air every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, here to teach you about tech and audio and all kind of great stuff. And we are excited about what we're endeavoring to do. And so let's as my one of my favorite shows says, let's do it. And let me get your screen up and we'll get started with our broadcast for today. All right. Oh, forgot to turn you off. I apologize. There we go. And let's get started. Tech Insights broadcast as a whole, will cover video production, audio production, software solutions, and we will be doing some great interviews in the near future. About your host, me, Brian Cochran, yours truly. I've been in tech and business for 30 years. I'm an author. I have like over 30 books that I've written. I'm also a trainer and a consultant, so I have years of experience. And my desire is to help you to take your tech to the next level. Now, again, our whole concept is through live broadcasting, which we're talking about tech right now, is doing live streaming and now understanding how the pieces of live stream fits together. We want to show you how important it is. And then there's some aspects I want to teach you today that we haven't talked about yet that kind of help you go to the next level. Because a live stream setup can quickly become complex based upon the need and expertise, our goal is to help you to understand what it takes to do a real, a cost-effective way to live stream, or as well as do video production as a whole. Tonight we'll be discussing, this is episode 4, software and hardware switchers. What is it, and do I need one? The next level of that we're going to talk about tonight is the video switcher. And if you see the pictures on there, we'll go over what a video switcher is and the different types. The switcher comes after the sources, but before the encoder. You will need to have a switcher to live stream, which is why it isn't one of our main ingredients, as we talked about for the last couple of weeks. We went through the main ingredients, and now we're getting to something that's, you don't have to have it, but it's something that you probably more than likely will need in the near future. But it can be tremendously useful, especially as live stream steps up to become more complex, meaning more and more need that you have. We want to do multiple cameras and so forth. Software or hardware video switcher, which route should you take? And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. What is a video switcher for live streaming? I'm glad you asked. A video switcher is a device or software application used to switch between multiple cameras and other video sources in real time. Let's talk about software switchers first. Software video switchers. Software production switcher applications offer a number of benefits, but the best thing about software switchers is the price. They're generally a lot more affordable than hardware options. For many users, software switchers are also easier to learn and work with, and they come with other useful functions to simplify your workflow and your streaming process. If your production isn't overly complex, you can probably get by with a software switcher, at least to get started, like I did. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Let's take a look at some of these softwares that are out there. As you see here, so at the core, each of these software running on a computer. And so you need to have a computer in order to work these. And I'm going to give a brief introduction to each one, and then we'll kind of go from there. So vMix is probably one of the vMix and Wirecast are more of your professional switchers. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, what'll happen is that with vMix, you still need a capture card to bring your camera into the system, or if you look at the bottom of the right side of the screen, either that or on your computer itself, and you bring that into, and then what happens is when you open up vMix, you go find, and one of these days we'll go into more detail on all of these, but I just want to talk about the first two, which is vMix and Wirecast first, and then we'll get into Ecamm for a second, and then OBS. Ecamm, just so you know off the top, is a application for Macintosh or Mac Apple computers, and then vMix and Wirecast. vMix is PC only, and Wirecast, I believe, is PC based only, and OBS is both. And so once you get into, if you look on the left side of the screen, you're able to have multiple cameras. So if you're planning on doing multiple cameras, then that might be the route to go, because what will happen is that you'll be able to see all the cameras on the screen, and then you just click to the camera that you want. Your preview on the left-hand side, the yellow is the preview window, and then the green is the actual program menu that goes out to the internet. And so that's the basics of software. Utilizing software on your computer or even virtual, which we'll get into in a second, virtual software as well. OBS which is what I started with, which is a free software that allows you to stream. And the same thing, if you look at the arrow, you have a scene, and then in the scene you have some sources. And so we're talking about right now. We're talking about display capture, or your video, bringing your video into the switcher to broadcast out to the internet. So the cool thing about actually all these other switchers that we talked about so far, they all allow you to do lower thirds. They allow you to stream, bring in your audio, as well as other effects that it allows it to do as well. The cool thing about OBS, because it's open, it's an open system, that you would be able to use all the different plugins that are available. So like there's something we're going to get into within the next couple of weeks, talking about how to syndicate your broadcast to multiple locations at one time. Well, with OBS, you can do it for free. And so that's the cool thing about OBS, and it's absolutely free to download. We'll have a course on the basics of how to do OBS in the near future. Oh, I messed up. Okay, I hardware switchers, and I should have done the pro. The next one, actually, let's get into the let me back up. Hardware switchers, and I messed up, and I'll catch it up in a minute if you don't mind. Hardware production switches are purposely built for video production, so you can know exactly what you're getting to and do what you're working with. The best feature of a hardware switcher is its reliability, because again, you're not depending on you'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. These devices are built for video switching and live shows. So if you're going to do video recording, you're able to do so, as well as you're able to do it with live streaming as well. A hybrid that uses specialized video hardware connected to a computer like Blackmagic's A10 Mini Pro. If you look at it there, what I did was a combination. One's vMix. So what you can do is you can take, if you look at the top of it, it's a 4-channel switcher. It also has its own encoder, which we talked about last week. It also has a bunch of different wonderful effects that you can utilize in order to make it to run and make it more efficient what you run. If you look on the bottom part of the screen on the left-hand side, you can see the inputs. It has an out and a USB out. So the cool thing about the A10 Mini Pro and switchers, hardware switchers like these, it shows up like a webcam. So just like let me do this real quick, and then I'll come back to the screen. Give me 1 second. So if you look at this, we talked about this before. This is a capture device, and it's converted to USB. So when it's converted to USB, the same thing here. So what happens is multiple cameras that you have, what vMix uses, that's why I have vMix there, or OBS will do is it'll show up as a webcam, and then you do all your functioning, your switching, as well as your other stuff in the hardware switcher. Let me go back to the hardware switcher. So if you look at the A10 Mini Pro, it has 4 channels. It has a cut. It has auto effects. It has all kind of stuff. You can do picture-in-picture and a bunch of other things that you can do within A10 Mini Pro or hardware solutions like that. And this is the one I have. I have both the A10 Mini Pro as well as the A10 Mini Extreme, which is an 8-channel switcher, hardware switcher that I use as well. So I got into that because I looked at some of the other ones, and it's more cost effective to use that than it was for me. I started off with OBS, and then I went to Ecamm. And one of the challenges, let me say this is a little pro tip that I learned, that say for instance you use Ecamm or you use one of the other software switchers. If you try to bring in two of this, like what I did was I bought, if you see here, I have two of the same Camlink capture cards. Part of the problem with this is that the computer, the software, the hardware gets confused because it's the same exact thing. So what I ended up doing was I ended up using a separate one, so I can have several devices, several video cameras inside. There we go. Excuse me. Several cameras on the system, and then when I added more, because I was on a Mac, I used the Ultra Mini Studio recorder that uses Thunderbolt. So I had 3-4 cameras that was running, but I had to have 4 different things. I got tired of that because sometimes it got confusing, and the picture quality wasn't the same. So what I ended up doing is going to the A10 Mini Pro, because it allowed me to use that in a more cost-effective way and be able to streamline my workflow. Not have the cool thing about hardware switches as well as video switchers. Say, for instance, you got a 4K camera and you have a 1080p camera and a 720 camera. The cool thing about some of the hardware switches like A10 Mini Pro, it makes them all they make them all equal. So they're based upon what you set it up to be. Most cases I do 720 because going into Facebook, which is where I primarily stream through on some of my broadcasts like today, they automatically buffer it down to 720. So even if you have 4K, even if you do 1080p, it'll still bring it down to 720. So that way it doesn't use as much bandwidth, which we talked about before. Hardware switchers also tend to come with more features such as 4K streaming, like I said earlier, additional inputs, video effects, multi-view, and keying, chroma keying. So if you want to do, like I'm on a green screen right now. So if you see behind me is a green screen, and you can use that as far as utilizing hardware switches as well as software switches in order to do so. And the price can climb based upon all the features that you want. The reason I went with the A10 Mini Pro and Extreme is because for the money, the next step up from those two, one is the A10 Mini Pro is $495, and the A10 Mini Extreme, which is an 8-channel switcher, is under $1,000. But they also have one that records, and I'm not going to get into that today. I'll get into more details a little bit later on. But the rule of thumb is, if your production needs to be versatile or more professional, you should look at a hardware switcher over software switchers, which is absolutely true. So that's why I'll go into more details on how to use the A10 Mini Pro and some of the other hardware switches. We'll talk about that as well. Some of the pros and cons of hardware switchers. They're reliable and more secure. Shoulders the strain, because shoulders the strain on your computer, and we talked about that last week, where we're using an encoder, onboard encoder or offboard encoder. The same thing happens when you're using everything that you do in video production takes up CPU, takes up storage, it takes up usage on your computer. So the cool part about an external hard drive, or an external switcher, is that it's self-contained. It also has its own encoder in it as well. Packed with a bunch of useful features. Easy to experience, video text to use. It is so easy to use to get started. An all-in-one solution that minimizes the need for extra gear like capture cards. And capture cards, I should also put, also encoders, because they're all built in one in most of them. The cons, only does one thing. So you can only do one thing with it, which is a pro and a con kind of at the same time. Can be expensive for what you get. So you can get into the real huge production studios. But if you look at what I'm going to be sharing with you in the next couple of weeks with the A10 Mini Pro and Extreme, that for 4-channel, For under $500 is incredible, and for an 8-channel for under $1,000, you can't beat it. Tend to grow obsolete faster than other software solutions because it's the truth. But at the same time, depending on the model number and depending what you're trying to do, you may want to grow anyway. But the software switches, one of the challenges of that is, or one of the pros of that is that they update it all the time. So as they update the technology, but they also do firmware and updates on the hardware switches as well. Both switches can connect to, and that's why I was going to get here. So you can connect to just like using the encoder. This encodes, both of them encodes, and it'll stream to YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn. Restream it has 2 services. One, they have a streaming service, and 2, they have a restream service where you're able to syndicate and broadcast your signal to 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 different destinations at one time, Twitch, and so on and so forth. I personally use, and I think I mentioned it before, I personally use StreamYard because StreamYard has some features that I still use my A10 Mini Pro, but then I go into my Restream, which I can broadcast to Facebook, YouTube, and 3 destinations at one time. But it also does the lower thirds, and it does for interviewing and for group meetings is better than a whole lot better for me than Zoom. And at the same time, it allows me to look more like a professional broadcast. Like now, I'm using it now. If you're watching the broadcast now, I'm using Restream now, and it allows me to do what we're doing now, show the presentation. At the same time, I can have multiple guests in at the same time, up to 8 other people besides whoever the host is. So you have 9 people in the room at one time, and it's very cost effective. They got a free version and a version that I use, which is like $25 a month. So, and Be Alive is a relatively new one, does some of the similar things that StreamYard and all the other ones do. And Ecamm, as I mentioned earlier, is a wonderful software switcher for those that are on a Mac, and it does some pretty cool stuff. It does everything that the hardware switchers do, but it's on software. In conclusion, which one is best for you? There are so many different configurations you can use for live streaming as well as video production. The cool thing about, again, you're going to hear me, it's a shameless plug, even though I'm not selling A10 Mini Pros, but the cool thing about them is that you can stream with them. The version I have, you go directly stream from my A10 Mini Pro as well as my A10 Mini Extreme. It can be complicated and it can get expensive. If you look at the top of the screen, that system there probably about $20,000, $30,000, with everything put together. Is that A10? Yeah, that is. That's A10 Mini, one of the larger ones, like a bunch of money. But after the purchase, it's quick to get up and running in no time because the learning curve is very, very short on either switchers, both of them, either the online switcher, which is a virtual switcher, or the physical hardware switcher. Of course, there's more that goes into live streaming success than just one piece of equipment. Don't forget to check out my book that we talked about last week, or actually for the several weeks. We'll go to that in a second. It is Startup Guide to Internet Broadcasting. It's my #1 book. It's written by yours truly. It's available on Amazon.com, as well as available on BrianCochran.org. I hope something's been said today that will help you to get up and running, to understand what switches are. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up right now before we go after air. If not, if you want to message, go into the comment section. If you have any questions, I'm open for questions right now. This is Tech Insights with Brian Cochran, and we're here every Tuesday at 6 p.m. And I'm so glad that you tuned in today to be a part of our broadcast. Hopefully something's been said again, or something's been done that will help you to get your tech up and running, look at options that will save you money and give you options to be able to do it the right way versus making the mistakes that I made. And I'll talk about some of the mistakes as we go along. Our company is FatX, and it's Pro Sound, Lighting, and Video. We do sales, training, and installation. If you like a free consultation, give me a call or email me. That's my email address on the side, as well as if you go to the website, it has more information about the services that we have to offer. We thank you so much for being a part of our broadcast, and we will see you very, very soon. God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.